Hello, welcome to the 52nd episode of the Unifying Force. I'm Kat, joined by Dave and Gio. How's everybody?
Doing well this evening.
Yeah, there's a little TV show that's been pretty good that might be on people's minds. So yeah, it's a good time to be a Star Wars fan.
Today we're going to talk about can Star Wars fans ever be happy, Ahsoka and all the other pitfalls, failures, and successes of Lucasfilm over the last few years. Dave, kick it off.
So we're not going to give you the short answer because the short answer I can give you in about that. But yeah, I mean, I have absolutely been loving the Ahsoka series. I think I might have had an issue here and there. We've talked about it on like the virtual Cantina watch along and some of the other content. But by and large, I've really enjoyed Ahsoka, especially like episodes 4 and 5. Episodes 4 and 5 are really, I think, Dave Filoni being Dave Filoni and really turning this into a new season of Star Wars Rebels, which I also absolutely enjoyed. I think is some of the best Star Wars out there, period. Live action, animated, video game, best Star Wars, period. I've been absolutely loving it, but we're going to talk about that a little bit and what we've enjoyed and what we've really liked about the Ahsoka show. But the follow-up and the thing to that is there's this whole other group of people. Well, okay, first there's the group of people that has put Dave Filoni on high, is the pedestal, God, George, Dave Filoni.
Yeah, the Holy Trinity.
But there are, right. But there are complete and total others that are just like, this is the worst ever. This sucks. This is terrible. I can't stand watching this and blah, blah, blah. And we'll go into like some of the logic and the reasons why. But I mean, let's first talk Ahsoka in general, the whole thing overall. What are your thoughts, your feelings? What have you liked, disliked, or whatever? But then kind of specifically deal with the last couple of episodes a little bit more since they're fresh in people's minds. And for the record, we're not talking about episode 6, even though by the time that this airs, it hasn't yet for us. Episode 6 is going to drop in about an hour for us, so we haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. What will lie ahead?
So, anybody, who's up? What do you think about Ahsoka?
Gio, you go first.
Okay, I think Ahsoka is a good, fine, nice balance that Disney and Lucasfilm have finally got between saluting what came before and giving us something new. It rides a really fine line between tipping a hat to prequels, requiring prior knowledge of characters, where I actually think they've constructed it in such a way that you don't need to know too much about Ahsoka to understand and enjoy it. Currently watching it with somebody who has not been up to speed with all of Ahsoka, and I know somebody who does not know anything about Ahsoka prior to just the idea of her being Anakin's apprentice during Clone Wars. That's it. Hasn't watched the Clone Wars and is enjoying Ahsoka a lot. Now, that might be a casual fan or not a Star Wars fan, more of a TV and film enjoyer. But I think that's from a very tiny anecdotal sampling. I think that might be representative of the wider reception. But wider reception aside, we can get to the breakdown and the audience scores and what people are saying aside from us. My own view is that I really loved the opening dual episode dropping premiere of Ahsoka. I think it was hugely rewarding, if a little slow and unevenly paced, and it got some momentum towards the end of the first episode that carried into the second nicely, brought everybody up to speed, got everyone back on track, reminded everybody who'd watched Rebels, which ended 6 years ago, that there's a lot to enjoy from Rebels, and we're going to bring you some of that stuff again, and also we're going to build on themes and in character stuff from Star Wars Rebels, take you to new heights and to new places. And they have visually taken us to a number of new worlds and inhabited some new production sets. And they've had a very varied kind of look to the show. I think the production value's been incredible. And I know that might sound really superficial, but that's definitely helped me enjoy it more. It felt really, really cinematic from the beginning, and I don't feel like it's dropped the ball at all. The CG looks better than any of the Mandalorian, I'd say. And the costumes and the production design, it all works so well. And I think it's shot very nicely. And I like the editing mostly so far. The writing and the performances, a little bit uneven. I thought Hera was kind of flat and a little wooden initially, but I'm warming to her. And I also appreciate this is not an impersonation of Vanessa Marshall. It's somebody else's interpretation of Hera, the character. So as long as it's under the stewardship of the original author, which is Dave Filoni, then I'll respect it, even if it might not feel like the Hera that I knew and that I wanted to get to know again. But that's all right, because I've enjoyed most other things in Ahsoka so far. Kat, how
do you think, Kat?
I liked it up until I was liking that I like that they didn't shoehorn any backdoor pilots. Like, the story is just, there's a limited amount of characters that we need to follow who are only there because they're necessary for the story for the most part. That moves the story forward with a decent pace, a very intriguing mystery to the story that you can all get on board with. But then the 5th episode happened, which was kind of like a fan service clip show that doesn't move the story forward at all, and it reiterates what we already know about Ahsoka. So it's like, okay, it looks cool in live action, but we've only got 8 episodes here, guys. Like, we gotta get moving as we're running out of time. And
I did feel that too with Part 5 a little bit.
Yeah, but for the most part, the show is significantly better than the 3 of the 4 previous shows they've offered us. So I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, I look forward to it week after week. I mean, I've had small issues. I've had issues with, it's great that they dropped episode 1 and 2 together, because if they had dropped it as just one, too slow, you wouldn't have known. Like the space battle standing on the hull of the ship, deflecting giant blaster fire from I'm sorry, no. Yeah, I don't even think I would have bought that if this was still animated. But you bring in that into real life, and it's just a thing. I'm not overly sure they're not shoehorning this as like things that are going to involve and build. I think we know this is going to build to the Filoni movie, but there's some theories out there that some of these things may roll on over. Some of the things we see may roll into Mando season 4. They may roll into potentially Skeleton Crew and some of the other Star Wars show properties that we know are coming, because the Filoni movie is allegedly, the culmination. It's the Avengers assemble of all the Disney era shows. So maybe they're kind of doing that, but I think overall, it's a really good show. It's got its own plot. It's got the right amount of Rebels, Clone Wars fan service in it. I think it's fan service done well that you don't see very often. You completely did not see that in Rise of Skywalker. There was not good fan service there. I'm talking the level of good fan service, like completely.
Yeah.
But that was more passable than the other. But we'll get to that in a minute. But I mean, it's the kind of good fan service, in my opinion, of Ghostbusters Afterlife and Top Gun Maverick, in that kind of vein. It's where, we're doing this, we're throwing this at you for the fans. We know we're doing it. We know we had to put Rooster in the Hawaiian shirt playing the piano. We just had to do it. And they're doing that kind of thing well. Sabine's got to come out and she's got to don the helmet. You've got to have the Loth Cats. It's good. But I mean,
Yeah.
can people not enjoy anything? I understand the levels of, Kat, you're saying things that you dislike about it. There's things, parts, and issues that I dislike about it. But there are people that are just outright hate this show and are, burning Dave Filoni in effigy on their front lawns.
Are there?
Why?
I'm glad I don't go on Reddit and Twitter for these things.
Like, there really are. They're the complete and total opposite memes. There are literally memes of Dave Filoni in the sky, in the clouds, as a deity. And there are other ones of, like, people shivving him in the back with a lightsaber or whatever. Because of the ire for this show.
Light and dark, there must be balance in all things. Yeah, I feel like there could be new internet rules invented just for Star Wars and Star Wars fans. Like, rule 66, there will always be crazy, evil, hating Star Wars fans who trash everything and think Disney's evil and Kathleen Kennedy's evil and they're pushing agendas and it's not my Star Wars. And really they're just basically usually male, man, baby, fake adults, I'd say, who have other problems in their lives and they project them onto people they don't know who are creating content that is designed for them to enjoy and consume. Okay, if you don't enjoy it and you don't want to consume it, that's all right. But don't, throw all your toys out of the pram and throw banana skins on the road and try and make it horrible for everyone else.
But like, do we remember did this happen for the original trilogy? Are you guys
Well, I don't know about the
feedback,
original. Well, I don't know about the original trilogy, but the prequel trilogy, yeah, a lot of people hated it.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, there was a lot of hate for the prequel trilogy. A lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Hey, that's a Jedi Master. Saves Baby Yoda. I don't know what you guys see.
Well, that's part of the problem why a lot of the people don't like a lot of what Star Wars is objectively correct as well. It's like we saw what happened in the Book of Boba Fett. That Disney saw how many sales they were making of Grogu, and even though Grogu's story was finished, well, we got to shoehorn him into this show, which they're not even a part of, is we need to sell more Grogu toys. Then we find out from Tamura Morrison that the reason the Book of Boba Fett sort of became less about him and more about Din Djarin is because they were too cheap to pay his salary to appear on Mandalorian.
Yeah, that's
like,
crazy.
Well, now you're compromising, making petty financial decisions at the expense of compromising your show. And as a result of Mandalorian or Book of Boba Fett becoming Mandalorian season 2.5, they had to create filler episodes for Mandalorian season 3 to compensate for the parts of that story they took off and put in Book of Boba Fett. So as a result, you have two shows. One, Book of Boba Fett wasn't great to begin with because Boba Fett was doing things that just didn't seem believable. He was getting kind of bested at every corner. I'm like, no, this guy's reputation, he's not going to be that dim-witted, especially for a guy who waltzed into Jabba's palace and just shot Bib Fortuna right on the throne without blinking an eyelash, And then that show turned out bad. Mandalorian season 3 turned out to be mostly filler, and for some reason was rushing a conclusion to what was a really interesting story with Moff Gideon. Obi-Wan Kenobi was just atrocious all across the board. The writing, the lack of story, the characters, the character motivations, the identity politics. Like, we have to stop it. And now Andor was great, but Andor was made completely in the UK under completely different people who were all veterans of really great TV shows. And it was really good for it. And now we're back to Ahsoka, which it's nicer because Ahsoka is just primarily Dave's thing. It's not just, Favreau or whatever. And as far as we know, fingers crossed, Grogu's not going to show up and, take over the climax of this show either as they, continue. But that's kind of, but when you combine that fact of those three kind of misfires with, the fact that they freely admitted they didn't have a plan for the sequel trilogy from the start, it's like, why?
That's the most egregious one, I think.
Yeah, and Disney, even if they wanted to have the same creative voice in all three, they couldn't because Disney's release dates were so crazy on that. Initially, wanting them a year and a half apart, that there was no way you could have the same creative team even if you wanted to. So they're now having to race and make this almost Frankenstein's monster type thing, but to not even follow, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, which was the basis for the original trilogy. And so you have the 3 big movies you kind of screwed up on. The Solo movie, I don't understand how there was no oversight on that to the point where they had to reshoot 80% of the film.
Then I still don't believe those statements. It does sound too crazy.
And then the problems with the shows I'm mentioning, and it's like, and then the lack of consistency with the story group. They don't seem to be in the writer's room, or if they are, they don't have a voice. Like, there's a bunch of stuff they wrote about Kenobi in the new canon Star Wars comics that was not reflected in the Kenobi show, because it seems the story group is either not in the writer's room there, or they're not given a voice or some type of, there's no hierarchy putting them in charge. The fact that one of the only key writers on all episodes of Kenobi freely boasted about how he didn't even bother watching Revenge of the Sith before he wrote Kenobi. And it's like, how are these decisions being made? And it's like, that's where you get all the cavalcade of despair and hatred for it. Who was like, what the hell are you doing over there? It's like, I mean, they had to put out a video reassuring fans that the High Republic will be planned from the beginning. See, and they shot a really nice promo video for it. And I'm like, well, this is like a given. You should have been doing this from beginning.
It's kind of crazy though. Like, let's do that for the books. We forgot to do that for the films. Sorry.
Now, the comics, I think, are really good. Yeah. All the new Star Wars comics are great. The recently completed From a Certain Point of View series for the original trilogy is fantastic. I hope they go back and do that for the prequel trilogy when those anniversaries come around again. So those were great. Claudia Gray, I think, is the best Star Wars novelist they have. She's a really great author. So I think they're doing really great on the publishing side of things, but I think they need I do believe that they need to have the the writers group, that Hidalgo and Leland Chi and all them, they need to be in the writers room more and maintain consistency and not be just, throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks.
Yeah. Or just
I don't have a problem with not everything being completely together. Like the Ahsoka novel I loved very much. And it was it kind of conflicted with Tales of the Jedi, but not completely. It was close. So I didn't mind that little bit that could be an overlap, but wasn't an overlap. And I really, really enjoyed and thought was amazing John Jackson Miller's Obi-Wan or his Kenobi novel. And I thought there was so much content that they could have mined and incorporated into the Obi-Wan show. That's like, why did you not? Where was that? What was the deal?
It's for season 2.
Somebody should. What's that?
It's for season 2.
Well, but it's not.
Yeah, it
because of things that they chose to do. It would have needed to be before what we saw. It was, it was his early days on Tatooine. And you didn't have to show it. You didn't have to rehash it. It's already there in the novel, but a few allusions to it could have made some crazy fun stuff. But I'm not here saying, well, it was crap because it didn't do this. It wasn't. It's like you had to know this was my Star Wars Kenobi, is you should have put that in the show. It had to be. I'm saying it's a missed opportunity. I still enjoyed the show. Okay. I know Kat just can't know. But I like.
Yeah, I think that there's literally in that episode, she's like, I can't. I just can't.
Never again. I will not watch that show. Like, never. Unless something comes up in another show which is blatantly referencing it, and I have to go back and check what it was, and I'm not watching that again.
I think
I kid you not. Ewan McGregor said in the making of Kenobi special, he's like, yeah, in that moment when Obi-Wan beats Anakin for on the planet again, and he's burying him like the quicksand or whatever, and Vader's collapsing. He's like, Obi-Wan is freeing himself of his guilt because he knows that he's won, and he knows that he's not really killing his former friend because he knows he's going to live. I'm like, well, if you know he's going to live, aren't you committing yourself to the guilt knowing he's going to literally saying that he's going to get away again and continue visiting all this terror upon the galaxy? It's like, I don't. For instance, they actually addressed that in a smart way. I was reading just before we started here from a certain point of view, the first Star Wars, because I wanted to read all three of them now that they're all published. And there's a chapter actually where Obi-Wan is conferring with Qui-Gon while R2 and 3PO are burying the Jawas. And he says that the reason he and Qui-Gon didn't discuss Anakin is because Obi-Wan didn't want to bring it up because he knew it would be a sore subject. And they confirmed that Qui-Gon did not know what was going to happen to Anakin. But what it does is that it shows that it's also addressing Obi-Wan's senses of guilt over it. And he's talking about his sense of responsibility that he's feeling. And granted, that's in the timeline of the original movie, whereas the Kenobi series a lot before. But a lot of what Kenobi was talking about is still relevant to stuff at the time of the Kenobi show. And yet here's Ewan saying, well, I'm going to free myself of guilt by letting him go again. I'm like, I can't.
Ewan's got to act and write less. Because he was a producer, I think, on the Obi-Wan show as well. So I don't know if he had much creative input.
Well, everybody produces everything anymore.
That's true.
So, but what's the deal with does everybody have to like it? I mean, Kat, we are in cantinas and shows and stuff all the time, but you don't just go out of your way to make sure everyone knows that you hate Kenobi. And anytime someone says the word Kenobi, it's like, no, about that awful show. Let me tell you a thing or three.
Look, I bought a shirt. Don't set me on fire, please. This shirt's really cool. Look at the artwork.
Why is that a thing? Does everything have to be my Star Wars? Okay, I think I've made it known before, and I say it on other shows. Generally, when it's brought up, I don't do this unsolicited. Is Star Wars Resistance is not my Star Wars. Is I don't enjoy it. Is I watched season 1 or the first part of season 1, and it was, at least at the point that I was watching it, it was too juvenile. It was not a thing. I didn't think it provided a lot of things to Star Wars, the larger Star Wars universe. But I keep hearing when I make this comment that, it got so much better in season 2. And some of our friends in the virtual cantina are Resistance fans. So I'm like, I trust this person's judgment. I might go back and watch a little bit of season 2 just to see if I still hate it. It's and I don't need to go and I guess I kind of am professing that to the world, the world of the people that watch this show, but still, I don't feel the need to go out of my way to think that the entire universe needs to know how bad I think Resistance is. Mm-hmm. Is that just the internet? I think that might just be the internet.
Well, I'm not going to name which ones specifically, but I do know for fact that some of the hate watching channels out there are it's like an act. It's like they don't actually feel that way, but they know it gets clicks. And it gets enough clicks, they get monetized and they make money off of that. And that's why they keep doing it. Now, I don't know. To me, that's something that maybe a psychologist should study. Like an actual what is this phenomenon with people being so obsessed with? Because a lot of the things that are being hate watched, the people watching those reviews don't even watch, literally didn't even watch the show that they're reviewing. They just like watching people hate on stuff. And I don't understand what that fascination is. I have another channel I'm on, Phantasmagorium, and when we started, the guy who runs it, Steve, he's like, if we wanted to, we could become a hate channel and get thousands of views and probably make a lot of money, but none of us wanted to do that, and none of us have the energy to do that, just freaking out and going every day. And it's like, I don't understand. It's gotten to...
I think, exactly. It's outrage culture has become popular, and also react culture has become popular. So when you have reactions and outrage and you combine them, then there's probably going to get millions of views on TikTok and YouTube Reels and Instagram Reels, and it's going to be shared. It's going to be like, oh, can you believe this guy was that mad about that? Would you believe it? And sometimes people, I think, enjoy the drama of other people getting really worked up about things because they even find it funny. And to an extent, I kind of find it funny. I think it's pretty funny that there's entire people who've made careers about or out of being over the top online. And it's not just Star Wars, and it's not even just fandom. It's the way all kind of content creation has gone. And you could even say that this kind of manufactured reaction and overreaction melodrama and outrage has been reflected also in the way TV, maybe like 20 years ago, started to go really heavily into reality TV. And now I feel like things are coming full circle again, and reality TV's become even more unhinged, and it's back. That there are shows in the UK that have late night on Channel 4. If you are channel hopping, don't do it with your family or don't do it with your elderly relatives, because there's a show called Naked Attraction where 10 adults are naked in a room, and there's a person judging parts of their body while their body's partly covered up, and like the cylinder containing, like, concealing the naked body starts at the head, and it drops down a segment each time as the rounds go on. I don't know what happens when you win the game. I've never sustained interest enough to watch it, but like, that's a thing that people watch, and it's now multiple seasons into being a thing. Why is that a thing? That's definitely something psychiatrists can discuss in papers and in conferences, but there's even more unhinged
This may be
things.
wrong on so many levels, but I really think I need to resubscribe to BBC America.
Oh, it's on Channel 4. but you can try.
Yeah, I don't know.
They'll put the box set on BritBox or something silly. There's that crazy one called MILF Manor, which is like older women with their sons in a like American mansion, and they discuss their own sons and other people's sons. Anyway, I won't say anymore. Reality TV is insane. Reality TV is completely insane, and I think that community insanity has spiraled from internet culture.
That's why I was so terrified when they announced that Warner Brothers was going to be merging with Discovery, because that is a reality TV garbage thing. Like, David Zaslav, David Zaslav, he made all those networks money, which is why they love it. But he made them money by destroying all the good content and replacing it with that type of reality TV that you're talking about.
Yeah,
and I don't understand what the allure of reality TV is either. I watched some of it, and it's like, well, I can tell for X, Y, and Z reasons this clearly isn't real. It's like, notice how every time somebody gets in a big fight on reality TV, they never get near the camera. It's like, yeah, that's staged. And how it's, you notice how in reality, real life doesn't unfold like a sitcom, but it does in an actual reality TV where there's an episode with a clear beginning, middle, and end. That's a scripted show. But for some reason, that type of stuff is caught on to the point that I have to specify that when I used to watch a lot of documentaries on something like the History Channel, I have to put an asterisk there, and I say pre-reality TV era, like late 90s.
Before 2005 or something.
Yeah, when it used to have tons of documentaries that you could watch on every major holiday, like all the stuff in the civil rights movement and all the stuff in the war. And I kind of took for granted how much I knew about all that stuff before they actually started teaching it in schools, to the point I was surprised by some of the questions my classmates were answering. But now, thanks to things like outrage culture and reality TV culture, it's just this collective dumbing down of everything, even on our entertainment, because movies have to appeal to the lowest common denominator. And I think people kind of had enough of it, as we saw this summer, where it was just flop after flop after flop, because people were just, whereas something more intelligent and clever, like, Barbie or Oppenheimer, just soared, because, hey, the people are telling you something. They're tired of this ridiculous, the reality TV outrage dumbing down of everything. And so unfortunately, I think it's simply because Star Wars has enough visibility as a major franchise that's obviously going to get caught up in that as well. But I think the more legit criticisms came during the prequel era. I mean, a lot of that got really vitriolic too, which is an open secret as to why George sold the company, and also for the criticism, to be fair, against the fourth Indiana Jones as well, which is a shame. I kind of would have preferred if George had simply retired and appointed a new president, and that they could keep making movies the way they did before. But c'est la vie.
I think that
you meet the documentarian. But I mean, what do you think about the backlash against The Last Jedi and going over to people boycotting or trashing Solo before came?
What do we think about that? Is that his question?
Yeah, I mean, did that actually happen? Some people say it did. Some people say it didn't.
It kind of did. I know that some hate watching channels were calling for a boycott over it, but I noticed by Solo's third weekend they had posted their reviews of it, so they thought, oh, we'll boycott it opening weekend or the opening 2 weekends to get low box office. So yeah, I think Solo's problem was, one, it had terrible marketing because they didn't want the marketing for the theatrical release to overlap with the marketing for Last Jedi's theatrical release, and they didn't want the marketing to overlap with Last Jedi's home media release. Then you had the big juggernaut that was Infinity War and how much replay value it had, plus the fact that if you're gonna make a Han Solo movie, well, Harrison Ford is Han Solo. It's not that Alden Ehrenreich did a bad job; he was fine. But if you're gonna market a movie and call it Solo, where's Solo? And everybody announces it's Solo. A lot of people discovered that movie on Disney Plus and they're like, "Hey, this is pretty good." Mm-hmm. But understandably, when the marketing's not that great, it's like you're marketing somebody and keep telling us it's Han Solo, but it's not really. And then you had the terrible publicity of having, the big announcement they made that, oh, we're firing our directors and we're 1 week out from the end of production and we're reshooting 80% of the movie. And anytime actors had to promoting something else or being interviewed, the question would inevitably come up, how's Solo going? And they give these very rehearsed robotic responses like, hey, it's all going good. And the only person who was cheerleading for Solo was Ron Howard, and not surprising, he's the director, but they just let that pall just kind of stay there for months as people thought, oh, this is probably going to be a train wreck. And then if you're not going to have the marketing and pushing behind it, then of course it's going to kind of flop. It wasn't much of a surprise, but yeah, the outrage channels want you to believe that, yay, we did it, we destroyed Solo. It's like, no, you didn't. Let's face it, diehard Star Wars fans will turn out for anything just to see it, to see how it fits in with the canon. And the box office was like 393 million. So that shows you a combined box office of all your diehard Star Wars fans and some of the casual fans who went to see it. It's a pretty small number compared. Whereas the sequel trilogy movies, they each made at least $1 billion or more. In Force Awakens' case, $2 billion. That obviously had a much wider appeal on the casual fan stage than it did on the diehards, because obviously the diehard fans turned out for Solo.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Force Awakens brought a whole group of people into Star Wars. So Gio, I think you've got some stats on like popularity or from IMDb on the Star Wars movies in general. So let's get those stats in here, and then we can talk about like some of the significance behind that, we think.
Sure. So I can start with the prequels. So we've got Phantom Menace on 6.5 out of 10 average user score on IMDb. Attack of the Clones is 6.6. And they're both so the Phantom Menace, that's had 835,000 respondents. So the average is 6.5 across 835K. Attack of the Clones had 740,000, 6.6. A little bit lower, but a little bit higher overall average. And then Revenge of the Sith, unsurprisingly, given the quality, and it maybe being the final part of the saga, and they did advertise that quite well as Revenge of the Sith being like the saga's now complete, the journey's over. 7.6 out of 10, and that's from 824,000. So, the least interacted with in terms of reviews of the prequels is Attack of the Clones. The lowest rated is Phantom, and the highest rated is Revenge. So I think that a lot of those reviews will have been done by people who've grown up with the prequels. Maybe because IMDb is one of the oldest actually popular websites around. The interface is still pretty basic. The app is a little bit more sleek, but and they do create their own videos and content now as a kind of media machine. But because IMDb has been around for so long, I think you'll have people who were on the internet in the 90s who might have grown up in the 70s or 80s who also would have rated The Phantom Menace maybe back in 1999 and maybe given it like a 5 if they were dissatisfied with the beginning of George Lucas's saga, and for all the reasons that we kind of know, like the sense of humor, the pacing, some wooden acting, some stilted dialogue, some maybe overemphasis on certain aspects of Star Wars that people didn't think were important, like Gungans. like politics, the taxation of trade routes. I don't think many people thought those phrases would be in the opening crawl of a Star Wars film, and definitely not in the first sentence. But hey, it's George Lucas's decision, and politics and economics was kind of mentioned on that tabletop by Tarkin and Vader in that, board meeting they had in the original Death Star. So it's always been part of it. It's been the underpinning machinations of the Empire. And so if you go back, like 4 decades to the beginning of the Empire, by seeing how the Republic is corrupt and decaying and falls apart, you need to talk about the financial and political standings of things. And yeah, I think the fact that you had, I guess in haters' terms, baby Anakin, but Jake Lloyd was 10 years old. Maybe he was like 9 actually when he acted the role, and when the film came out, Anakin is a boy, he's enslaved, and he's just has a loving mother, and that's all. He's nothing like the Vader that we know, and maybe there's not changes, but the differences of expectation didn't sit well enough with some older fans, and that's why you had prequels getting hated on a lot, aside from all the technical and kind of materially understandable issues that people had with the film. But yeah, no, what do you think? That's a surprise or not, that Phantom's the lowest, Attack is just slightly higher, and Revenge is significantly higher for fans in terms of their audience scores?
Not in the slightest. I think those are, I've looked at those numbers, and I think those numbers kind of for the prequels are spot on. What we've been saying, and the numbers for the sequels that you have too are pretty spot on.
Yeah, I'll just mention those quickly.
I hear from general people.
Yeah, so The Force Awakens, Last Jedi, 6.9, Rise of Skywalker, 6.4. It just goes down.
Wait, what was Force Awakens?
7.8, which I'm really surprised at.
Oh, wow.
That's above the end of the Sith.
I'm not surprised that Revenge of the Sith has the highest, because that's the one that has all the key scenes that people expected to see from even when the moment they announced that they were even doing a prequel trilogy. Mm-hmm. Even though I think that's probably the second best of the 3. I think Phantom Menace is actually the best of the 3 because it has the most practical sets and models, and it shows. Like, it looks real. It's not all CG'd to death. Mm-hmm. I think the acting is the best because it's not as wooden, and the dialogue isn't as atrocious, and that's mostly because of the scenes with, the love story with Hayden and Padme and all the politics stuff and all that redundancy in Episode 3 and more of that and bad CG. But those ratings don't surprise me there. Force Awakens, 7.8. Again, it doesn't really surprise me because in that event, they're basically retelling the original Star Wars, but making it even faster and more intense than the original seemed in 1977.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Even though I don't agree, I wouldn't rate it that high if I'm looking at it as an actual canon story. Like, if I'm looking at it as a movie by itself, yeah, it's really fun, but it still doesn't work very well as a script, even for what it's trying to do. Second one of those 3, I think, is the best. Third one of those 3 is really bottom of the barrel.
Right. Just out of interest. Well, like, interesting point, more or less. The respondents, Force Awakens had 957,000 reviews. The Last Jedi had 656,000, and Rise had 476. So even like the interaction and people bothering to write reviews online kind of tracks with the kind of maybe the box office return, but also the pop cultural impact and like the general audience view. I think The Rise of Skywalker had the fewest, the lowest box office of the 3 by quite a way. But still, as you mentioned, exceeded $1 billion overall, which is Titanic.
So let's stop for a second here and talk about, because you kind of alluded to it, bandwagon reviews. Is, does the reason why there is so much Star Wars hate on new content and things, is it that it becomes cool to hate certain things? Is, like Last Jedi, you know from just our circle of friends, there are people that will fight tooth and nail to the death over it is the greatest thing I have ever seen in my life, or Ryan Johnson is the devil incarnate. But other people, do they hear this and they pick a side, and this is where you got to be? I assert that I myself am kind of down the middle about that. I admit that particular movie is beautifully shot. I like a lot of the things. I like a lot of the concepts, but some of the concepts, Canto Bite, just completely ridiculous.
There, Dave.
But is that contributing? Is that the way of things?
Yeah, to an extent. I think there's, again, it's the internet culture that spills over into the real world. And we've got the overreaction, the action culture, and the outrage culture, but you also have the desperation in wanting to be heard and wanting to be seen or feel seen or have an impact, or and it's easy, to gather interest if you jump on the crest of a wave and then ride the surf up. So if people are review bombing something and you partly agree with it, if you lean into fully agreeing with it, then you're going to have more people, on your YouTube channel. If you write in block caps, "The Last Jedi is the worst Star Wars ever," or "George Lucas is weeping," or "Star Wars is forever broken by TLJ," all caps, 10 exclamation marks, 5 emojis, that's going to sadly appear on people's Google searches and YouTube searches higher up than someone just looking for The Last Jedi, an objective review. There is no such thing. It's not going to be as attractive to people who have short attention spans and are scrolling and infinite scrolling and doom scrolling. And there's that entire the Oxford English Dictionary added the phrase doom scrolling during COVID to the dictionary. So the idea of doom scrolling is you keep scrolling your social media or internet feed on your phone until you find something either like dark or depressing or unhappy or something that will deliberately make you miserable, and you allow that to make yourself feel more miserable, and then you keep scrolling and keep clicking and continue like this spiraling vicious cycle. And again, it comes back to like a social psychology aspect that maybe people more qualified than us can comment on, but definitely seems to be more popular, and jumping on the negativity of others to make yourself more heard. I definitely think Twitter, down to its structure, has encouraged that. And then if you go onto certain subreddits, you'll see that, go taken to a wild level. And probably on other forums that thankfully I don't even know about on the internet, that the web is dark and full of terrors, is what I will say, borrowing from another franchise.
I think it has a lot more to do with the fact that they killed the most popular character in all of Star Wars in the first installment of that trilogy, and the fact that they didn't reunite any of those characters. And so you leave the theater and you're like, okay, so Han's not going to be in the next two, and we're not going to have the characters reunite. And oh, look, at the end of The Force Awakens, Luke is like a hermit who's looking rather depressed, standing on the hillside, that painful look on his face looking at lightsabers. Like, clearly that's not what people were expecting to see. And so interest is already trending down. And not to mention that you spend so much time focusing on somebody like Rey, but the fact that JJ even took the time to clearly make it a big deal when you see like Han for the first time and you see Leia for the first time and you see Luke, it's like, okay, he's consciously aware of that these are the characters they want to see and how big of a deal it is. But rather than writing a story around those characters and your new generation, it instead kind of becomes this weird thing. It's like, you could keep him in the background, or like, why bring him back if you're just going to kill him for a pointless, meaningless way? Because there really was no point in Han walking out and talk. It's like, okay, this is the end of a journey between father and son we didn't get to see, and it's there because we're ticking the box of, well, Obi-Wan died this way in the first one, so we gotta, in the spirit of copying things, just do that with your most popular character of Star Wars. And it's like, you've already told a bunch of people, and not only that, is that you're rehashing the plot beats so much that you've just told people that the next 2 movies are just going to rehash all the plot beats. Case in point, JJ's like, don't worry, no more Death Stars. So what does he do in the third one? Oh, we'll bring 100 Death Stars, but they look like triangles now instead of spheres, so I guess it's better. It's like, because JJ's he's not a writer, so that's where I think that's where you have all the downtrend coming. It was right after the first ones, because again, it was Force Awakens is going to be a juggernaut simply because it is the sequel to Return of the Jedi. That's primarily what it is, and it's the fact that it's the first live action Star Wars movie in an era where Star Wars is no longer going to go away forever because now Disney has it, and so that's obviously was going to be a huge, because it made the bulk of its money within like 6 weeks or something. It wasn't like it. Yeah. Yes, it kept playing in the theaters for months, but I can't remember exactly when it hit the 2 billion mark, but it wasn't that far out. So I think that has a lot to do with the downtrending. And then you kill Luke in the second one, and then you find out between then that Carrie died, so we're not going to have her for the third one. And you bring back Ian, and it's like, well, the other fans of the first 6 movies are like, oh, so you're just going to invalidate everything Anakin contributed to the saga? Okay. It's like, did nobody at Lucasfilm raise a finger of protest and point out how that's kind of problematic for the story that's been set up from the first 6 movies? No? Okay. That's why the things keep downtrending. It's because they're not even paying attention to their own basic So I can forgive them if they didn't dig out some Legends book from a long time ago. Like, hell, Rian Johnson even did that when he came up with because that's where he got the idea for the astral projection thing at the end of the movie. It was from one of the, I think it was the Book of Jedi or something, about there's the Book of Sith, and then there's like the Book of Jedi, both put out by Lucasfilm, and then the Holdo maneuver he got from Clone Wars season 1 and Clone Wars season 5. So it's like there's okay, so I'm like, why is the director of the second movie of this trilogy doing more homework and digging for things than the people in charge of actually writing? It's like, oh, let's bring back Palpatine. Well, that means we have to bring back Anakin, sir. Oh, really? Why? Yeah, it's I don't understand. And that's why I think people are getting really frustrated with it at this point. Kind of like when you had that investor call in December 2020 and they said, oh, we're going to make a Lando series. And they didn't have any writers for it. A year later, oh, it's still not written. Oh, it's still nobody. Oh, we're going to get, Donald Glover and his brother write it. That actually sounded pretty cool.
Yep.
No, first they're going to get Justin Simeon, the guy who just did Haunted Mansion, and that didn't do very well. So now, what a coincidence. Right after Haunted Mansion kind of flops, you switch gears and give it to Donald and Steven, which I think was a better idea to begin with, is to let those 2 write it, because they're really good at the other projects that they've done.
Yeah.
Oh, but now it's only going to be a movie. And it's like, I'm still, no.
Skeptical, yeah.
It's like OT. Oh, I haven't even started. I can't even finish writing it or started writing it 3.5 years later, So it's just, usually those types of deals where things fall through with directors is kept behind closed doors. Like, that type of stuff happens a lot with, in Hollywood, where you have pitch meetings or you discuss something, it gets so far and then it just falls apart. But the fact that it's been happening so often with this new Lucasfilm, I think, and with all those other problems, I think is the thing that a lot of people are kind of fed up with. And like, again, I've lost any confidence in any announcements that they make. It's like, I'll believe it when it drops on Disney Plus or when it drops in a movie theater.
Yeah.
So,
well, one thing I will say, a little bit more positively, is that Ahsoka has made me feel like they should resurrect Rangers of the Republic, and just have. You don't need to have Carson Teva even. Just have new characters, and put us in that post Return of the Jedi world, because there's lawlessness, as the Mandalorian has shown us. There are worlds struggling to emerge with their own identity, such as Mandalore, but hundreds more. And hey, look, there's even other galaxies and star maps and ancient religions and cults and cultures and peoples and extragalactic things. So the world suddenly, maybe the best thing Ahsoka's done for Star Wars is magnified the scale of everything. So we can have, firstly, there's no reason now to make things small and focused only on Skywalker characters or legacy things, because it doesn't matter where in the timeline we are, you can go so wide within the Star Wars galaxy and now within other galaxies, that anytime you don't give us some variety in things that are new, I think people do have valid reasons to criticize and be disappointed. But I think
that was
the best thing
talking
Disney
a little bit about. how you know, not having a plan and they somehow Palpatine returns is some of what really created the hate for the sequel trilogy, is some of the dislike and the hate for the Disney verse, the Filoni verse, or whatever, all the shows. Is it that at least in early Mandalorian, it looked like John and Dave are kind of going back and trying to explain some of that. We've got a lot in the Mando plot is explaining the cloning, a lot in those sorts of things. Is that the hate for the prequels carrying to be some of the hate for the Disney verse?
Well, I think it's them doing damage control to try and answer, because like they said, they're not going to retcon all the fact that they made those movies. So you don't have to rationalize why they made those decisions. Like there was more background story information in the Rise of Skywalker visual dictionary than there was in any of the other visual dictionaries they put out there. And that's a problem, because the writer was doing damage control for, and that was Pablo Hidalgo writing that, to try and explain away all this stuff. And one of the explanations he came up with for Exegol was, well, once Palpatine became Emperor for the first time, every month after that, he would smuggle one Star Destroyer off the manifest and send it out there. And it's like, well, if he was planning that contingency plan that early, why even bother with the First Order contingency plan? Why even bother with a second Death Star if you're already having thousands of them built out there? It's like, it makes no sense. And so John and Dave have been left to try and make it. Like, for instance, JJ's editor, Mary Jo Marquis, did an interview shortly after Rise of Skywalker came out. And she's like, oh, yeah, we came up with the idea to put the Snoke vets on Exegol as a last thing during editing. It was a pickup shot that they just scrambled and did on a stage and they didn't ask the story group about it or what the implications meant. They just did it because of that. Well, I guess we should answer that. Let's just do it's like, really, you made the whole third movie and you didn't bother and you hadn't even thought of how you were going to explain the relationship between Snoke and Palpatine. It just didn't occur to you until late in post-production that you should probably put that in there. And it's like you can't make this stuff up, but somehow, so John and Dave have been doing all this damage control lately, and well, this is where we're at.
Yeah. I think that Ahsoka's also going to be doing damage control for the sequel trilogy. Without speculating too much about what that might be, I think that. What do you think that it's slightly influenced by fans or entirely influenced by his own gut feeling and the way he spoke to George Lucas about the origins of things? That Dave Filoni has kind of started us along the heir to the Empire sort of storyline. Probably won't get anything like the novels and the comics, but the fact that that was used in marketing, it means that, to me, Dave Filoni, he acknowledges the gigantic fan base, or at least the vocal and passionate fan base that exists for the EU, all the stuff pre-Disney that was beyond the films, and he accepts it as a valid part of the Star Wars fandom that deserve, some appreciation as well. So if you saw the future of Ahsoka and the Mandoverse being something that comes directly tying into EU Legends novels, would that make you happy, or would that make you feel a little bit disappointed that we didn't get something new and maybe Dave's own interpretation of where Thrawn would go and how the Imperial Remnant would manifest? And, whether these are, one thing I loved in the Heir to the Empire trilogy is the existence of this animal species called the Isilmari, which create a little localized force field that is free of the Force. And it was the subject of one of the video games as well, Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast. There are so many extra storylines that were created through the other media beyond the films. So the video games and the entire LucasArts division was thriving and fantastic, and all the Star Wars games there were quite standalone in their ingenuity, and they were very fun. They didn't all sell like hotcakes, but they were very much loved by Star Wars fans. You had Shadows of the Empire, you had TIE Fighter, X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, Rebel Assault and Rebel Assault 2, the Rogue Squadron series, which was inspired by the novels. And then there was this kind of symbiotic back and forth between novels and comics and video games. And they each kind of informed and improved each other. And it's just a shame that it feels that Disney kind of isolated these things from one another, the story group, the video games, having it exclusively with EA initially, I think was a mistake, because by siloing off an entire media format for a storytelling universe, you are just isolating it and making it stagnate. And there are fewer voices giving fewer ideas. But yeah, going back to what I was asking, if Heir to the Empire becomes what we see on screen, would that satisfy you or disappoint you?
Number one, I don't think it's going to happen. Because I think Dave has had the plan of what is going to go on and what is going to happen, and has this through line since Rebels. He's been playing the long game. A lot of the stuff you see in early seasons of Rebels that you thought was slow, that you thought was silly, that you thought wasn't going to amount to anything, makes a difference later on. And I really think that the stories that we're seeing now in live action, I think Dave's had in the back of his mind that were the next season of Rebels. And he had chosen before, any talk of him doing this movie that's Heir to the Empire and whatnot, he brought Thrawn into Rebels for a reason. I think we're going to see Filoni's Thrawn story. Is that story influenced by Heir to the Empire, the original Zahn trilogy? Probably, because Dave, we know, is a fan. He's looked at this content. Maybe not, I'm going to use it chapter and verse, but I'm going to put a lot of Easter eggs and things in there from those. So I think we will probably get, I hope, a happy medium of the two. We're going to not, no way is he going to go back to, Luke's clone from his severed hand, we're not going to get that. But could we allude to things like that? Because we have seen they are going the cloning to explain Snoke.
Yeah, it's possible.
Well, I know in an early draft of Force Awakens, they were going to begin with Luke's severed hand still clinging the lightsaber floating through space. So it's like weirder things have happened. But yeah, they're going to allude to it. He's like kind of like when the eagle-eyed fan noted that they were foreshadowing Grogu killing Moff Gideon as far back as Rebels season 4, whatever season it was, because you see the fresco on the wall showing it. Which is kind of a shame because that kind of confirms that, Moff Gideon is really dead for good, which is a shame because that was a terribly written, just they threw it out the window. It's like you build up this character and most of season 3 was building up to the fact that he got away and he might have a plan, and then they just raced it to end it as quickly as possible. It's like, why? But whatever.
Let's bring it back.
Yeah, so they've got a plan. Kind of like when they brought Dark Troopers into, kind of like when they brought Dark Troopers into season 2. That came right out of the EU. So you allude to things in certain ways, even if it's not going to be a literal adaptation. And so that's kind of what they're doing. But if the pattern or if the plan holds true, and that after Ahsoka we're going to get a movie at some point, then I don't think they're going to follow the Heir to the Empire trilogy. Especially now that whatever Ahsoka went to ask Luke on his planet where he was building his new Jedi Order, again, we can only assume that she was there to ask him to join the hunt for Thrawn. I don't know if that's true or not, but the fact that he said no and is going to stay there, I doubt that he's going to be brought back into the fold, since they've just established that he's focused on building this new Jedi Order. Meaning, I don't think you're going to get the Mara Jade storyline, and I don't think they should at this point, because you would have to be too over-reliant on de-aging technology, which is kind of wonky and spending way too much time. It's like, no, we don't really need that story. There was a time and a place for it, but that was like 40 years ago when they finished Return of the Jedi, and they didn't do it. So take your cues from where you want to take them, but I don't think you're going to get a literal adaptation. I think they just said the heir to the Empire line in Ahsoka and made sure to drop it in the trailer to excite fans and get them to show up.
Yeah.
And that worked because, as pointed out when they did that fan event last week, they sold out. Well, technically they didn't charge money for it, but they were out like that, like hotcakes.
Yeah. That's a raw nerve for me. I feel like I found it straight away and I shared it and I clicked it and it was free and then it was all sold out. But I enjoyed taking in Ahsoka
We're
Part
getting
5.
to be about that time. Go ahead, finish your thought, Gio.
Oh yeah, no, I was just saying, I was also trying to bring it up, kind of in a circle back to Ahsoka Part 5, because I don't think I shared my opinion on what happened in it. I feel like it was a really incredible love letter from the guy who writes the best George Lucas love letters to fans, Dave Filoni, back to everybody by giving us Hayden the way that Obi-Wan never did, and even the prequels potentially, by giving The World Between Worlds a live action debut, but without overloading people who might not know what it is with information. Initially, I was a little bit disappointed that it was so quiet and silent, and we didn't hear the echoes of the past and the future, because I love that idea of the sound and the vibrations echoing from other points in time and space. And that's what we saw Ezra undergo as he got more advanced in the Force. He initially only heard Yoda, then he saw Yoda in the Lothal Jedi Temple before eventually being able to go to the World Between Worlds fully, which was kind of his character journey through Rebels. I think Ahsoka's been given a nice character journey by Dave Filoni, even though we've not seen all of it. Some of it's in a E.K. Johnston novel. Some of it is implied between parts of Tales of the Jedi and The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett. But it feels like Ahsoka has finally returned to the essence of who she was. And the tagline on Disney Plus, I think, for Ahsoka, like the summary statement for what it is essentially saying that a former Jedi Knight seeks to find Thrawn in like a divided galaxy. And I think that's a good summary of Ahsoka, but also a good reminder that Ahsoka had left the Jedi. Maybe that's why she failed at training Sabine. There's still more in that we don't quite know. I'm not sure if we will find out more. But the only disappointment for me was Sabine and Thrawn and Balin and Shin and Morgan and all of that gigantic hyperspace halo had vanished, and we didn't get any information about that. We just had a focus on Ahsoka. But then again, it's Ahsoka's show. So I think we needed to focus on Ahsoka's journey a bit more. And we're going to get these answers potentially in Part 6. But I love the idea of Anakin being Ahsoka's consciousness and her kind of like inner monologue, her inner voice, but manifested externally with the light and the dark, using everything she knows and her memory and her feelings to create this version of Anakin, which mirrored what we know is real and what became of him, but also showed us what would have been and what could have been if choices had been different. And the fact that Ahsoka chooses to live, I think, isn't just like a metaphor for resurrection, and she's wearing the white now. She's like Gandalf the White, but Ahsoka, she's been reborn as a Jedi. She's ready to finish Sabine's training and find Ezra, defeat Thrawn. But she's now also returned a little bit to herself, to a feeling of where she can be in touch with her emotions rather than being kind of cold and distant and aloof and arms folded the way we've seen Ahsoka through Mando and early parts of the show. I think we're going to see Rosario Dawson now maybe sound a little bit more like Ashley Eckstein, maybe emote a little bit more, and maybe be even more passionate to find Sabine and Ezra.
Yeah, I think those are really good things, and we will undoubtedly on this show talk more about things that have happened in Ahsoka and things that we're going to see in episodes 6, 7, and 8, and we'll see that in future shows. But we are getting towards time, and to wrap this, I mean, I think we've opened still a can of worms with this. We started talking with can Star Wars fans ever be happy? And the quick answer is, Gio said this way earlier in the chat as soon as I posed this question. The answer is nope. The answer is nope. Cannot be happy with new content. But some other things that I want to know are, I would like to see some younger fans that are fans that were brought in by the sequel trilogy. What are their feelings for the OT, for the original trilogy? Do they hate that because it's not my Star Wars, and because, you know, it's crappy practical effects from 1977 that, you know, that we think still hold up, but they're like, come on, throw some CGI in there. I want to see some computer graphics, damn it. You know, I want to see those opinions and know that. But, you know, maybe that's a future show and we can talk and get some, like, you know, younger guests on here to give us that opinion. But here's to wrap up, and as our final deal, here's my question: can Star Wars fans ever be happy with new content? And I want you guys in the chat and watching this along to give us your responses to this as well. But I want everybody to, are we the problem? Us, right here, because we have all taken our turns tonight talking about what we love and bashing what we don't. And we're out here putting our opinions and everything on the internet because YouTube and the Virtual Cantina Network and all those things have given us our platform to push our opinions out there in the world. Is it our fault?
Well, it's a collective thing, but I think it comes down to depending on, is the thing feeling genuine or not. Like I mentioned, a lot of this hate watching channels just do that because it gets clicks, even though they themselves don't really think that. So if you're putting at it, and is the opinion more of an informed opinion, or is it just like you mentioned earlier, oh, you didn't do this one little thing I want him to do, so the whole thing is evil? It's like, you know, that's how you kind of parse through it. But another, to your point earlier about what would people brought in by the sequel trilogy think of the original trilogy, I want to see which people who saw the prequel trilogy first think when they see Obi-Wan go out in episode 4, considering how major of a character he became in the prequels, to see that they just kind of happens and they gloss over it like that and we're moving on with the story. That would be interesting to hear.
Yeah. I actually came across a Star Wars fan who I think saw the prequels first and had an obsession with Hayden Christensen. And I said, hey, you got to watch the Clone Wars and Rebels so that you can watch Ahsoka, so that you can see Hayden's return. And then I actually thought, no, just watch Ahsoka and enjoy the Hayden. And then if you want, go back and watch Clone Wars and Rebels, because I mean, it's going to be everywhere on the internet if you're online. And if you follow anything Star Wars related, even the official Star Wars channel, I think, is now like freely showing images and clips of Part 5. So yeah, I think it is interesting to see what different generations, or just people who might be similar ages but came into Star Wars at a different time or through a different specific era of the saga, think of what came before. I think it will be really interesting to see people who grow up with the sequel trilogy now, because Rey has inspired, I think, probably thousands of girls to want to tie their hair that way and have a staff and maybe have a BB-8 alongside, or, you know, enjoy the companionship of a droid. And that's getting more and more likely now with AI. We might have droids around us sooner than we think. So I think the sequel trilogies definitely created a new generation of fans, some of whom might not have felt as connected to Luke or to Anakin, but will have done to Rey. And so there are definitely good positive impacts that the sequel trilogy have had, even if they're not really deliberate or as intended as what could have been if they had been better planned.
Yeah, is okay. So everybody out there is it's all right. We can give our opinions, we can voice it, and I think there's a place for all of them as long as they are your opinion. Is not hate clicks. Like I legitimately, you know, believe our brothers over on the Nerf Herder Council, and while I don't agree with it, I believe fully in John Drake's hate of Purgles. I believe it. I think he does. I know he preaches it, and he's there every single time, and it's amusing to watch. But I don't for a minute think that is getting clicks just for the hatred. I believe you, John. I understand where you're coming from. But yeah, everybody just go out there and enjoy your Star Wars. Whatever it is, enjoy your Star Wars. Let somebody else enjoy their Star Wars. By all means, proselytize and try and convert your friends to your Star Wars. That's what we all kind of do. And I think there's a place for all the Star Wars, even Resistance. There, I've said it. There's a place for all the Star Wars out there, and I think there's so much more that we can enjoy, and I really want them to keep making more, because there's going to be more out there that I enjoy going forward. And is there going to be stuff that I don't enjoy? Yeah, probably that too. But we don't want them to get to the point where they stop. That's we've been there. That was that whole period of time between Jedi and Heir to the Empire, essentially. We don't ever want the dark times again. So anyway, thank everybody for watching. Really coming out here on a little bit of a long episode, but we had a lot to talk about, and we still have a lot to talk about potentially on this topic. So thanks for watching. Catch the more shows. Rebels Revisited is going to be, Monday night, and they'll talk about that. The Tuesday after this airs, is going to be super special. Our friends over on Skywalking Through Neverland have their 10th anniversary special. So as opposed to the usual Cantina, we're all going to kind of jump over there and watch that and see what's going on with them. But we've got more episodes of Ahsoka coming out. We've got more Ahsoka After Show. We've got more of the Jedi Archives. We've got more of the Nerf Herder Council. And we're all going to be talking about Star Wars. New content, old content, what we love, what we don't love. It's all there. So until the next time we see you, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I guess it all depends on our point of view, right? May the Force be with you all.